Now we're into the external process. And the first thing that you have to know is body positioning. What's the proper stance? Well, I recommend a few different ideas on that. The first one is, what should you do with your hands? Well, there are two ideas. One is to have your hands right by your sides. When I took the Dale Carnegie signature course way back in 1998, I was taught by the instructor that I should just have my hands by my sides. Don't worry about your arms and your hands. Just lay them by your sides and let them drop and be relaxed. Don't be tense. Your arms shouldn't be rigid. They should just be lying naturally by your side. So that's one way. And some people feel very comfortable doing this. Another way, and this is my preference, is to have your arms bent at the elbows and have your hands just above your waist with your fingertips just touching. So generally when you see my hands in their natural resting state, this is how they're going to be. And I've found that in most of my audiences, when they try this and they try this, they prefer the secondary stance. What about your legs? Well, your legs should be just about shoulder width apart. Your knees should be bent just a little bit. Be a little bit flexible. And consider that you might have your feet just slightly spread apart, which eases your movement from one side to another. When you stand like that, and you have your shoulders up and back, and your head up high, with your head straight over your body, you look good. In the Bill Gove Speech Workshop, they call it the presidential stance. And when you look at yourself doing this, you feel presidential. So this is the stance that I recommend. But remember that if you like this better, then go with that. The things that you don't want to do. You don't want to put your hands in your pockets. You don't want to do the fig leaf or the reverse fig leaf or just one hand in your pocket. And in terms of your legs, you don't want to have your feet too close together because that actually makes you a little imbalanced, nor do you want to have one leg crossed in front of the other because that actually doesn't look good on stage either. So avoid that. And you find more women doing this than men. So those are all the stances and positions to avoid, and I gave you a few options for ones to focus on and use. Now let's talk about movement and gestures. Important parts of a presentation to be sure. But let me caution you right here at the beginning that you want to let movement and gestures flow naturally into a talk. Don't think too much about movement and gestures because when you do and you work too hard to incorporate them into your presentation, it can seem contrived. In 1998, I took my first job as a manager at a Fortune 500 company. Wow, did that feel good. But 10 years later, I felt like I'd been there and done that. And I wanted to go out on my own and become a coach. So I did. In 2012, I opened Speak Well and Sell, my formal public speaking, coaching, and group instruction business. You see what I did there? I started a story that has chronology in it, and that's one way to use movement in a presentation. So now I'm back to 1998. Then 2008, then 2012. Chances are you know what happened during each of those milestones in my presentation. That's how you can use movement chronologically. And just keep in mind that you being on stage, you're opposite the audience. Therefore, you need to move from your right to left in order to properly express movement chronologically. Another way to use movement is just naturally as it seems to make sense. Let me give you an example. You're speaking to an audience that is spread out in a fairly large room. In that case, I recommend that you actually spend time on both sides of the room. Spend time on this side, speaking to the audience. When it becomes natural, move to the other side and speak to that part of the audience. This is natural movement that connects you with the audience. But here's the thing that's really important to understand. As you're delivering your presentation, never move during an important part. At points where it really matters, lock your stance and look right out at the audience. I call that lock and look. And make a point. because this is a part of the presentation you don't want your audience to miss. And if you're moving while making it, it may seem less important and it may go right over their heads. And you don't want that to happen. So anytime you come to an important point, lock and look. How about gestures? Should we think about gestures and what gestures we can make, such as, I looked out from the ship's board and I saw that there were some birds out in the distance? Well, probably not. We're not acting here. Therefore, let your gestures just come naturally into a presentation. Certain people speak with their hands, and that's okay. Just let it happen, because the audience wants to see you in your natural state. The more we're ourselves when we present, the more the audience can connect with us, and they don't feel like they're watching a performance. So allow gestures to just happen naturally. If you're like me and you actually often don't gesture with your hands very much, then you may want to just start to feel what it feels like to speak with your hands. And the larger your audience, the larger your gestures should be. Don't keep them in this little box right in front of you. Get the feeling for letting your arms spread out. And people that just do that naturally, well, you're in luck. So what did I share with you here? When it comes to movement, allow it to be natural, work both sides of the room, but always lock and look when it's important. Also use movement chronologically as it makes sense in a story and you're moving through time. When it comes to gestures, if it's natural for you, speak with your hands, but avoid repetitive gestures that won't really make the presentation any better. For example, if you just always do this, well, now that's become distracting. And those types of unnatural, repetitive gestures you'll want to be conscious of and actually tamp down. If you're not sure if you're making repetitive gestures that aren't helpful, use a video camera. Record yourself presenting. There was a time when I was working with a client, and what we found out when we watched the videotape is that he actually did this little body wiggle every so often during his presentation. He had no idea. But once we watched the tape, he realized that every so often, there came that wiggle. Once he knew it, he was able to consciously stop the wiggle. And that's why you should watch yourself on videotape if you suspect that you might be doing gestures that are unnatural, repetitive, and distracting the audience. Eye contact. It's important. Regardless of how you feel, nervous, a little bit anxious, you have to make eye contact. It's important because bonding with the audience is a part of professional speaking. And it's hard to bond with an audience if you're looking to the side, or you're looking down, or you're looking above your audience. You need to look them right in the eyes. And when it's really important is when you're using that lock and look method that I taught you in the last section. When it's an important part of your presentation, lock your stance and look someone right in the eye and make your point. Eye contact works for certain parts of the presentation, and you want to actually complete a statement when you're looking at someone. And then when it's time to move on in that presentation, then you can move about and then lock on to someone else, move about, share a different part of the presentation, look at someone else. You don't have to go to the effort to look at every person in your audience. And sometimes the audience is going to be much too large, or you'll be distanced from your audience, and it's just not possible to look at people beyond the first few rows. So just understand that eye contact does have value, and it's an important part of connecting with your audience, and do your best to look someone in the eyes when you're making important points. Voice quality is something that can really make a difference between how you're perceived as a confident speaker or one who's not so confident. The technique that I teach my clients is what's called the Volume 8 exercise. I ask my clients to do a short part of their presentation in front of someone else. And I ask the other person to say, at what volume did you hear the speaker speak? If they say anything less than 8, then I require my client to raise their volume and reach at least volume 8. There's a little subtle understanding of the audience that you might want to know. Have you ever heard the phrase, fake it till you make it? Well, it works in public speaking. You might be feeling nervous and anxious inside, but they can't perceive it. What they can perceive is your voice quality. So if you come right out and speak in a nice, loud, confident tone at volume 8, and you have the right stance, as I shared with you earlier, your audience thinks you're confident. And when they think you're confident, then they feel better about the content that they're receiving. They feel that it's more authoritative, that it's convincing. So fake it till you make it actually works in combination with voice quality. But it's not just about volume, it's also about pace. Sometimes you want to speak a little bit faster because you want to get through material a little bit quicker, but also to change pace for the sake of the audience. They want to hear you change your rate. There are times in your presentation where you're going to want to slow it down and bring your voice down a little bit and even lean into the audience. I was peering through the window. The people inside didn't know that I could see what they were doing. They were looking over the loot that they had just pilfered from a house that they had robbed. See, at a point like that in my story, my voice is going to go down, and I'm going to slow it down and bring it down and lean in. That causes the audience to lean in. When I get to that point in the story, and then I heard a dog bark and it made me jump. And then I raised my voice. There are times where you want to get to even a louder point because you're excited and you want them to feel that excitement. So voice quality goes up, it goes down, it goes faster, it goes slower. Achieve voice quality by following the different ideas in this section and challenge yourself to try. You really have to work at voice quality in order to feel that you're improving that area. And again, as I've told you in the past, how will you know if you're doing these things? Record yourself, either with an audio recorder or a video recorder. When it comes to voice quality, it's not so important that you videotape yourself, but at least you want to be able to hear the audio recording to know if you're bringing it down, if you're slowing it down, or if you're speaking at that volume 8 that we've talked about. That's important. Now let's wrap up the external process with a really important but hard to do technique. It's smiling. I'm smiling right now because I feel good. I feel good about sharing something with you that was actually hard for me to incorporate. Back in 1998, a long time ago, when I was taking Dale Carnegie, my instructor Betsy would tell me, Michael, just smile a little bit. Loosen up and try to smile. It was hard because I was rigid. I was finding the process difficult to get over my fear of public speaking. I did end up having a breakthrough in the class, and I started relaxing a little bit. And once I realized that I could relax and actually smile while giving a presentation, it was a really empowering thought. And now I try to find positions in the presentation where it feels natural to smile. I mean, of course, when we're telling a very emotional story, that's not the right place. But whenever you're sharing something that's a little bit humorous, or you're trying to just help the audience understand how you feel good about the content you're delivering, that's a good place to smile. So feel good about yourself as a presenter. Affirm yourself. Visualize positive outcomes. See yourself smiling in your presentations when you're visualizing yourself in your mind. And it will start to become more and more a part of your presentation.